The Candid Frame is one of the great resources for photographers and those interested in the creative process. Today on the Crit House 3 series, we are joined by photographer, educator, and podcaster Ibarionex Perello, who brings us 3 images made during a recent trip to Japan. After losing his home in the Altadena fires, Ibarionex found himself turning inward, using photography as a meditative practice and a way to make sense of everyday moments. In our conversation, we talk about how trauma reshapes creativity, the quiet power of self-documentation, and the patience required to wait for the right moment. Ibarionex Perello talks about this and how life changes us, and how the camera can help guide the way forward. So you've had a challenging year, I think would be an understatement of putting that. You lost your home early in the year to the fires that were out your way. Can you tell us a little bit about how that has affected, I mean, I know your life in a huge way. I mean, you lost your home, but how does that affected you creatively? Could you maybe talk about that for a moment or two?
Yeah, creatively, it's put a real damper on my typical photography because normally I'm doing a good amount of traveling during the year and then practicing my street photography throughout Los Angeles, and that's really been minimized to a great degree over the last year, especially the photography that I usually did here in the city. I work at the Huntington Library as a special projects photographer. And I found that they were after work, I had another job in terms of just like rebuilding here.
Yeah, right.
Once we got settled into this house that we're renting not too far from where I work, there was just so much to have to try to figure out, in terms of insurance, in terms of understanding what would be involved in terms of rebuilding, constantly looking at what we can practically do within a short period of time, tapping into resources, supportive resources in terms of being able to, fill a empty house with stuff because we didn't have anything other than
Right.
what we walked out of the house with that night. So there was just so much. So it was a lot of energy was sort of dedicated to that. So most of my photography has revolved around my walks at the Huntington Library, which has these beautiful gardens, the desert garden, the Australian garden, Chinese and Japanese garden. So after lunch, I usually would just do a circuit. So I ended up taking a lot of photographs, unlike what I normally would have taken. But it's been good. One, it gets me to get some steps in, but it allows me to try to apply everything I've always used as a photographer in a very different subject matter. So that's been good. And also I've been making pictures of just domestic life here. Because one of the things I recognized about the loss of the house is those pictures that I kind of not absently, but that I made almost without any real intent around the house and around the property. They bear so much significance now because all of that's gone. Yeah, so one of the things I'm doing here is just making pictures of how we inhabit this space. Because I know that, once we leave here, we're never going to come back here. But the fire made me realize the importance of just self-documentation in terms of being able to tell the story of what life was like here for the year. So I'm making a lot of photographs here. Just grab my camera and, the bed's unmade, make a picture of that and dishes in the sink, or the dog is resting on her bed, or whatever it is. Those small little things that I'm living through each day. I'm going, okay, that's a picture, because it keeps me stimulated, but it also is going to be an important record of our time.
And you didn't do that kind of work before, or was it just of a different nature previously?
Oh, I was always doing it around the house. And when I would, I always had a camera around the house. And when I would walk the dog, I would have a camera with me. So I would walk around, Altadena. But I wasn't thinking about those images having any significance or importance. It was just like, oh, I might find a picture. But when I look through those pictures, especially about images of the neighborhood, that stuff is gone,
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
look at those photographs, I go, oh my God, I've got I've got images of Altadena before January 8th that are never going to exist again. So it just reaffirmed the importance of photographing the familiar and the mundane in your own life. That I don't necessarily have to go somewhere to make photographs.
The difference of
And
looking out versus looking in, right?
yeah.
But it does sounds like that's a fairly dramatic change. Do you like the work you've done? I mean, is the recent work? I mean, is that like growing
Yeah.
in you?
Yeah, I like it. One of the things that, haven't really I've been shooting them and not really looking at them. I just kind of make the pictures and put them into Lightroom. So I haven't really had a chance to start parsing through them. I do recognize that there's a little too much structure to them in terms of, because I'm pride myself when I'm shooting on the street of being very sensitive to form and shape, composition. But one of the things that I've really liked of the work that I've seen others do is that it's more snapshotty.
Looser.
So trying to be less precious about the composition and just going more for how it feels. So that's one of the things I know I need to do more of. I actually was thinking about that this week, going forward. It's just like making pictures like that, just one-handed, not even looking through the viewfinder, just like, just take the camera, jet it out. That's an exercise I give my students to do. And I find for me, that's kind of the best way for me to get into that kind of photograph. Because if I'm looking through the viewfinder or through the LCD, I just default to, okay, everything in its place.
Well, so I'm also interested in the impact of the work you've been doing with the podcast for over these many years on how that has affected you as a creative person as well. You've done. Are you over 1,000 podcasts now? I mean,
Oh, no,
no,
it's 600 something,
oh,
maybe
okay.
650.
Well,
It would be
still
1,000
lot.
if I'd kept, yeah, it would be 1,000 if I had kept doing it every week, which is what I was doing for the first decade, I think, pretty much. But I slowed down and did it every other week, just to make it manageable.
But that's a lot of conversation with some amazing photographers. I mean, I think all of them are on your show and you talk to them for a reason. What is the impact when you look back through the time from beginning to end of how that's affected you as a creative and as a photographer?
I think it's opened me up to what people can do with their photography. The kind of images they make, and especially in terms of projects. It's been really fast. That's been the biggest thing, because I think when I started the podcast, I was still thinking in terms of the singular image. I
Yes.
wasn't thinking in terms of projects, whether they're short or long form projects, and thinking contextually in that way. So that really kind of opened my eyes beyond, traditional photojournalism and documentary photography. People who are doing stuff that's very, very personal. Some of my favorite work are people who have been turning their lenses inward and using the camera to explore relationships with their father during childhood, or going through middle age, or going through a second marriage after a divorce and rebuilding their lives. And all of these people are making pictures that are not on the nose. It's really interesting. There's a photographer I just recently had, Amari Willett, on the show. It hasn't been released yet. It's an internal exploration, but he's using the external world in order to sort of explore it. And the kind of pictures that he makes are just all over the place. They're pictures of the outdoors. They're indoor pictures. They're figures. They're just different things. It's just not like, okay, these are landscape photographs. These are portraits. And it's the sequencing and the putting the images together that give all the individual images greater meaning. So I think that the show has kind of opened up that world to me, where I'm really excited by when I get a photo book that uses that, rather than just being a collection of the best photographs that the photographer,
Right.
has made over their career. There, I'm thinking, oh, I like this picture, I don't like this picture. But with these books that I'm referencing, it's more of the thought behind the entirety of the image making. And that's, I think, been one of the things that's opened up to me and that I've gotten a greater appreciation for over the years.
It's funny you say that, because I'm actually in that same spot as well. We're recognizing that that's something to be done. My challenge is I don't know how to do it yet, right? Like I recognize that I don't want to create a work or a project that has just all the bangers, right? And just here are the great images that I've taken that I really like, but something that somehow is reflective of me and tells a story of the place and the thing that I'm trying to tell a story about. I haven't figured it out yet. So I'll keep listening to you and see if Mark, you can help me there. To go back to the Altadena and Pasadena communities where there can be some help. I know that there are some organizations that are there to assist photographers to come back and have the resources they need. Maybe you can just tell us real quickly and then we'll talk about your 3 images, about what those organizations are.
Yeah, I have a mutual friend, Gail Nichols, who's a photographer. She was also a retired educator. And she herself, her and her husband lost their home in the fire. They actually were on vacation celebrating, I think, an anniversary.
Oh my goodness.
When they saw what was happening back at home. So it's just like, it's no good way to have to sort of discover that or witness that.
No.
But that must be particularly heartbreaking and made you feel even more powerless. The fact that you were, somewhere else in the world. And
right.
Everything you have is going up in flames. But she's been really great about starting an organization that benefits the many photographers in Altadena who lost everything, not just the equipment, but their archives and the means by which they oftentimes made a living. So she she figured out how to create a nonprofit with the idea that people could donate both funds and equipment to help replenish these photographers, and the photographers, submit their information to the organization with basically what they need. And over the last several months, they've been able to help photographers get photographic equipment, computers, different things to help them sort of get on their feet. Because I can tell you, when you realize how much stuff you had and you realize how much it's going to cost to replace it, because one of the unfortunate, stories out of the fire is how underinsured so many people were, including ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
For photographers, it's like when you're trying to restore your life, spending money on equipment, even if you earn a living from it, it's a challenge. It's just a challenge because especially this year, stuff is not cheap. So she's been incredible in terms of what she's been able to do for so many people. I really encourage people to look them up at altadenaphotographers.org. There's no shortage of ways you can help. You can donate, you can send equipment.
Well, we'll provide a link down below for anybody who's looking and wants to help out there. So you've joined us to talk about 3 images of your photographs. You've been with us before helping with critiques. You've been for our My 5 series, talk about those photographers who were of influence to you. And now we turn the camera on to you. And you've sent 3 images to discuss. The first one, well, let's say all 3 are from Tokyo. So maybe tell us, what was your decision process? Do you remember about sending those 3 images? About like why these 3?
These images were made last year, in December of last year, during a photo workshop that I lead there through Nobechi Creative. And
George
it was
great man.
Yeah, George is awesome. And it was my second trip. My first trip was in 2019, and this is second time around coming into the city. I felt very different as a photographer when I was there the second time around. I could really kind of feel it. I felt that these images were a good representation of not so much the pictures I made, but how I felt making those photographs.
Tell us about the first one. You've got the first one starts off with this image through a frosted glass with a warm light from behind and a person in the window.
I had gotten up very early in the morning, before sunrise, to go and walk not too far from where we were staying. This is an area near one of the subway stations where they have a lot of bars. and things. So a lot of, I guess, the salarymen will go down there after work and they'll drink and socialize and then stumble back home if they're going back home. Yeah, I was just walking around by myself that morning and I saw this scene of the window and it just immediately caught my eye and I was framing it. And as I was framing it, that's when the figure from behind the window came to the window. And I made just a couple of frames, but it was just one of those moments where it was just a reinforcement of this idea of embracing the wandering without going out with any particular intent and just responding to something and not dismissing it immediately, right? If it doesn't have everything it has, like, oh, there's something here. Let me play around here and let me not rush to the next scene. And then when she came to the window, I was just like, oh my God, it just played out. I like that picture. I think it's a beautiful picture. I really love the photograph, and especially the gift of her coming to the window makes it all the better. But it just reinforced my belief in the instinct in terms of just trusting that I will find what I'm meant to find when I'm going out to make photographs. Because sometimes I don't often go there with a particular intent. I'm like the flaneur, just wandering and seeing what I experience. But sometimes it can be difficult to trust that when you burden yourself with the idea of, oh, I got to make good photographs. Oh, this is the only time I'm going to have to shoot, so I got to really make something good. And I wasn't burdened by that. It was like, I'm just going to go out and play and see what I can find. And that picture is my gift to myself for adhering to that concept, to that principle of just being open and not trying to force anything.
There's something magical about that process of just going out. And I don't know anything about the Buddhist religion, but it feels like there's a Zen that you get into, or a zone you get into,
yeah.
and just allowing yourself to be there and having the patience to accept what comes. And it feels like as you're talking about this, that's what happened here.
Yeah. It's for me, it's definitely a meditative practice when I'm doing that.
So your second image, a little bit different. This is a starker street scene, woman coming toward a corner and a couple of shadows walking in the distance. Tell us about this image and why you've chosen this to be amongst your three.
This is another image that, again, affirms a different approach in terms of sticking to a spot and working a scene until it pays off, right? I came onto that scene. There's this long street in Tokyo, which I think on Sundays is closed off to street traffic. So it's just pedestrians. So you're able to walk down this long corridor. And this is kind of like a Uber Rodeo Drive. I mean, it's just massive. Thousands and thousands of people. So when there are that many people around, it can be very distracting in terms of what to focus on for the sake of a photograph. It's just there's so much. And not least of which is that you're in Tokyo. But I was walking down the street and I saw the shadow play against the wall. And I went, oh, okay, that's interesting. If I can get somebody walking down the sidewalk and I can get some shadow play simultaneously, that would work really well. But with so many people walking down the street, most of the time it's not working. So it was, I think I was there for 20 to 30 minutes, anticipating people coming in, because I needed, whenever you would have a cluster of people, it just wouldn't work because they would just overlay each other within in the frame. So it was always trying to anticipate, oh, this person's coming here, hoping that something would happen in terms of giving me some shadow play on the wall. So it was just a question of persistence and just not giving up and just saying, I'm staying here. I'm just staying here. I'm staying here. My gut is telling me there's the potential for something really good to happen. And I can't undercut myself by saying, oh, it's not working and walking away.
Right.
Because I've made that mistake. And the moment I put down the camera and walk away, the shot happens. It's like, damn it. Right. So for me, it was just like, just to stay here no matter how long, until the light changes to the point that it's not available, that the scene as I've imagined it isn't available to me anymore. Just keep shooting. So I made this shot, and I think I made dozens of shots after that frame. It was really interesting because I showed it during the critique session, in the class, and I wasn't particularly happy with it because I had imagined something else. I was imagining something else, and it didn't manifest itself exactly in the shot. And George had to point out to me that it was a good photograph, but I was still holding on to what I had imagined could happen. So it was a good lesson in two ways. One, about the importance of sticking to something if your gut is telling you to stick with it. And secondly, that immediately after a shoot, I'm not the best arbiter of what works and doesn't work or was a good photograph. It was too soon for me to be passing judgment because usually immediately afterwards, I'm really hard on myself.
Well,
But
I also think there's that piece of sometimes we don't see in our photographs the things that other people see because they're not blinded by our own personal biases. So having George or somebody else come in, people who are trusted to look at your work and give you and have them tell you what they see. That's the benefit of having a strong community.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love George's personal aesthetic as a photographer, but especially his comments about not only my work but the work of the students who are in the class. I mean, he's wonderful, and as you well know, and people who watch this show are familiar with. He brings a great sensitivity to his images, but also into his discussions of all things photographic that I really appreciate.
I think I need to reach out to him again and have him on for this 3 series. That'll be another one to do. So your final image, also Tokyo. Tell us about that. Now this is a little more chaotic. Your other images are a little more formally structured. You talked about sort of you're trying to break out of that formal structure with your images around your house, and this one seems to do that, at least on its face.
Yeah, it is still very formally structured. The overall composition is like I saw everything in that, and I built the frame around that. It's a little alley, not too far from one of the subway stations, and I just saw the light and the color, and I immediately knew that I wanted a human figure with it, but I wanted to blur him. So I chose a relatively slow shutter speed and shot a variety of people as they sort of moved through the scene to complement it. Because I saw it, because a lot of my pictures are built by finding the setting first and then thinking about, okay, what more can I add to this in order to make it even better? So that's why so many of the photographs people tend to see in my Instagram are so structured that way, because it's not like I'm coming upon something and raising the camera and making a snap. I usually find the scene because it's appealing to me because of light, color, line, shape, whatever that is. And I built the composition around it. And then I started thinking, what else can I add to this? And sometimes it's a human figure moving through the scene or multiple figures moving through the scene. And in this case, it was just like, okay, I just see from the corner of my eye as people are moving and make a snap. And of the ones that I made there, I didn't make a whole lot there. I probably made like a dozen or 2 dozen pictures in there, because a lot of those images end up failing just because of relative position of the figure to the camera and to the background, and also just in terms of timing, because you really have to sort of you have to gauge the gait of the person who's moving before they get to the spot, and then sort of anticipate when to press the shutter release button. But I've been doing this long enough that I got a good sense of when to press the button. And sometimes I'm off just by a little bit. And it's frustrating, but that's par for the course, man.
Yeah, I get used to that. Well, great. Three great images. Thank you for showing them. And nice to sort of see a little bit into the world that you are inhabiting, not only before the fire, but after the fire as well. So the last question that I've been doing on this program is actually inspired by your last question for your podcast, where you ask people to talk about a photographer that people should know. But in this case, is there an image from a photographer that you would like to know more about? Like, so if I were to reach out to someone and to say, hey, I'd really like to talk to this person about this image, what would that image be, and who would that photographer be?
The first thing that pops into my mind is Arthur Meyerson. I think you've had him on the show.
Yes, he's been on a couple of times. Love Arthur.
Yeah, and there's this I think is one of the pictures, I think is one of those iconic pictures of a cowboy with a toothpick on the back of his hat. is
I know it.
just that picture. I never get tired of looking at it. And that's one of the things that amazed me about that shot is that it's so simple and yet so easily overlooked. I just love that photograph just because of Arthur's ability to be able to recognize it. I think that's what impresses me so much about that particular
Sure.
photograph is Arthur's
That
ability
you
to
saw it.
recognize the potential of something so ordinary and to be able to make a beautiful shot of that. I mean, I've talked to Arthur personally, but I've never asked him directly about that photograph. But yeah, that's the first one that comes in my head.
Well, he was one of the first people that we had on this 3 series, and that was not one of the images he chose.
Uh,
But all of the images that he talked about were very similar in that in terms of the, I don't want to say simplicity, but it's this, they are simple image, but they're meaningful, and the way he describes them is lovely because he describes how he found them and what he was going through to think about those images. So that's a great image to talk about. Thank you. Ibarionex Perello, it really is an honor to have you on the program again. It's always kind of you to give us your time and your input and your insight. You are you're truly a somebody who has given to photography at a level that I'm not sure is paralleled elsewhere. You're the resource of your program, the Candid Frame, for us is unbelievable. So thanks for being here, and thank you for your program as well.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you for having me again. It's always a joy to have a chance to talk with you.
Same here. And thank you for all for watching The Crit House.